Welcome to the Voice of Senior Care. I'm Morgan.
And I'm Kiana.
And we're bringing families and the caregiving community together. Friendly Voices, the Senior Care Podcast.
Thank you for coming again to Friendly Voices, the Senior Care Podcast. My name is Kiana James, and I'm your host, and I have my co-host,
Morgan Williams.
And we have a special guest in our studio today, Miss Erika. Erika, tell us the name of your company.
It's called A Perfect Fit.
A Perfect Fit. So we're going to learn all about what a perfect fit is. We had a segment already talking about heartbreak decisions when mom and dad have to leave their home. We felt that it was such an important topic that we wanted to bring a part two and really go into a little bit more detail on what those options are once you've made the decision that mom and dad do have to leave their home. But before we get into those specifics, we want to learn a little bit more about you, Erika. So tell us about you as a person, and then I want you to tell us about how you got into senior care and about your company.
Okay, so I've been working with seniors since I was 14. So it's over 20 years now, not to tell my age.
She looks great for her age.
I started in a nursing home, then worked in hospice, home health, senior living, and then I decided to start my own company, 2 degrees in it, so I'm pretty well versed in everything seniors and senior living.
And you said degrees, what are your degrees?
The first one is in community health and the second one is in public health, both of them with senior sectors.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Yeah. Now, I know, so me and Erika go back, but I remember when you were working, it was either hospice or home health.
It was home health.
Home health.
Yep.
And I remember when she had the idea to start her company. And
you inspired me.
And I was like, do it. If I can push people towards entrepreneurship, I'm always trying to do that. So I was just so happy to see how you blossom. And
thank you.
It's very hard when you're starting something as an independent, really to get your brand and your name known. And Erika's done a wonderful job. So let's go back. You said you've been in senior care since you were 14. What made you get into senior care? How did that happen?
My mother made me go to her job after I got off the school bus. And she worked at a nursing home and she made me file paperwork. She was the director of medical records. And then from there, they were having issues with the state as far as, I guess they kept getting tags. And so my first job was actually the CNA's aide. So I would go back behind them and give the residents water to try to decrease the hospitalization rates, dehydration rates, things like that. Then went into dietary and receptionist and did my administrator in training and yeah.
Oh, that's awesome. And I think it's always important for us to know kind of our why or why we got into something. So I think that's very interesting. And I kind of got into this, I've told before, because my mom was a caregiver, both a family caregiver and a professional caregiver. So I was kind of watching her and got into this industry. So I think that's so interesting. Now, take us back to that moment when you decided, okay, I want to do my own business and I want to do this particular business.
I was working, let's just say, in corporate, and I identified a need. So when you're working for a bigger conglomerate, such as the company I was working for, you get to see a lot of service failures. And then you get to see that these companies are giving seniors what they want them to have and not what the seniors want to have. And so I identified this opportunity and obviously the opportunity for growth, and I decided to just jump out and do it. And that was 5 years ago.
Wow. Yeah. How did you come up with the name?
That was a brainstorming session. It started out as being provider concierge, and that didn't really explain what it is that I was doing. And so I really wanted something that encapsulated what it is my mission is. And so A Perfect Fit just kind of came because obviously everyone wants to find the perfect fit for their loved one.
Oh, that's awesome. That's awesome. Thank you. So how has this journey been over the last 5 years?
Pre-COVID.
Oh, yeah. Well, hey, let's say pre-COVID and then post-COVID.
Awesome. During COVID, good. actually. Not bad, though. Post-COVID is different because the climate is different. Now everyone is a little bit more wary if the shutdowns happen again, if they can't visit. Now people are, and even the communities are starting to see what's important. So having the family members having access to their loved ones, that's a huge thing. And that is also one of the reasons why people are now a little intimidated on choosing senior living. So it's different, but a lot of the census are increasing, which is great. And there are new communities that are popping up. So the market still says it's time to go. So things are good.
And I think that's interesting what you say about new communities opening, because even though we all went through COVID and, there was kind of like a pause and what do we do for families, the market is very strong. I don't know about in other states, but definitely in Houston.
Very strong.
Literally all over Houston, there's communities. I was at an event just yesterday, and one of the ladies was talking about how her and her husband were investing in a property, and I'm like, oh, what are you doing? It's happening all over. So there is still a lot of need for seniors to go somewhere. And so that's why I think this topic today is going to be so very much so important, because we really want to dig in deeper as to what those options are and what the pros and the cons of those options, because we've seen it on the news, sometimes the horror stories, but we've also seen the really positive stories as well. And so we want to give you guys, just some information when you're trying to make those decisions, because it is a hard decision.
It is.
And we work, what Morgan and I do with the seniors, and we see them at that time where, okay, well, maybe I have to move out of my home. Okay, what's next? Most time these seniors are very, very hesitant. They don't want to move, and that's what we talked about on our last episode, some ways and things in which to get mom and dad to move or convince them. But once we have convinced them, okay, now it's time to move, what's next? So what do those options look like? And we talked about how important it is to have those seniors involved in that decision making.
Absolutely.
We just went through that with one of our clients who we had for 3.5 years, but they were able, the caregiver and the son was able to allow that person to be in that decision-making process.
Correct.
And that's just so very much so important for that senior. So what we're going to do now is we're going to take a commercial break. Don't go anywhere. But when we come back, we're going to look deeper into what these different options are and what the pros and the cons are of each of those options, so it help you make a more informed decision. Don't go nowhere. Let's hear from our sponsors.
Singles. Do you feel it? The feeling like it's time to start having fun again? If you do, then you're ready to celebrate with Events and Adventures. There's never been a better time to join than right now. Meet new people with a packed calendar of fun events, exciting adventures, and future memories. It's time to live life to the fullest, to high five, skydive, and feel alive again. That feeling is here at Events and Adventures. If you're single and ready to celebrate, visit eventsandadventures.com to get started. That's eventsandadventures.com.
AT&T Fiber delivers a faster internet experience than cable. Ask me how to get 300 megabits per second for only $35 a month, plus taxes and fees, with no annual contract, no bundles required, and unlimited internet data included. Call Boss Up Houston Network at 832-895-5095. Again, that is Boss Up Houston Network at 832-895-5095. Limited availability may not be available in your area. Speed change based on the launch upload and download capacity of internet speed and 500 and 1,000 for Xfinity selection and possible internet off the minutes 1 gig 1.2 gig cable services with uploads from 10 to 35 megabits per second. Download max speed is 920 megabits per second and 1,000 speed vary.
And this is Boss Up Houston, where we look up, stay up. And where we look up, stay up. Stay up and boss up. This is Boss Up Houston, where we look up, stay up, and boss up.
Wanna be a boss? Let's talk business. Let's talk fashion. Let's talk health, fitness, community, lifestyle, and finance with Boss Up Houston, Saturday mornings at 10 a.m. It's Boss Up Houston, where we look up, stay up, and boss up.
Adventures.com.
Welcome back to Friendly Voices, the Senior Care Podcast. And I'm your host, Kiana James, and I have in studio my co-host, Morgan. And we have Erika from A Perfect Fit, and we're talking about what to do when it's time for mom and dad to move. So this is part 2 of the special episode. We felt like it was so important we had to bring you some more experts on this topic. So in our last segment, we did talk about the different types of options for mom and dad to move into. Now we're going to talk about, when we're looking at those options, what are the pros and the cons that you should look for? So Erika, we're going to talk first about IL. You know we use a lot of acronyms. So independent living and active aging. So let's talk about independent living. So when we talk about independent living, what is that?
No kids are on property. That is number one. That is the biggest selling point. They have happy hours. They have events. It's more so for people who are active. They're in sound mind. They don't need a lot of assistance physically, such as with ADLs, bathing, grooming, toileting. They really, truly just want to live with other seniors. So that is definitely independent living. And a lot of times they can make those choices themselves. So there's typically no family intervention. It would be couples that are downsizing from their home, and that's their first stop. So it's a smaller setting, but still for couples or seniors that are independent.
Okay, and so we've toured a lot of these properties, a lot of them gorgeous. Like I moved in. But they usually come with an age restriction?
Yes, 55 in most cases.
Okay, yeah, I think that's
60 in some.
Okay, I think that's interesting because that's a big gap between like 55 and maybe 70 or 80. A lot of times we see people that are kind of like in that 70 to 80 range. But I know I was on one property and they were joking that there was a couple that was in their 60s or whatever.
Yeah.
And they absolutely loved it because most of the residents were older. Yeah. So they felt like, oh, we had the full threshold. Yeah, we had the whole property.
Yeah.
They're usually really, really nice.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a lot of them that are being built in the Houston area. What I've noticed for independent properties, most of them they look like apartments or so.
Luxury apartments at that.
Luxury apartments. And you said that they come with meals and all of that. How does
sometimes it just depends. Some come with 1 meal, some come with 2, some come with meal credits, some come with none. Because in independent living, what separates that from, let's say, a memory care or even assisted living is they have full kitchens. So they're able to use the oven, stove, large microwave, not necessarily having a kitchenette. So in an independent living, you should be able to still make your own meals.
Ah, gotcha. And then I noticed that a lot of times, well, I guess in all times, you have to downsize quite a bit. Mm-hmm. So you're leaving your house, 1,500, 3,000 square feet house, and you're going into this tiny apartment.
Spacious. Depending on what your budget is. Tanglewood area. So it just kind of depends. There are some, that are beautiful 2 bedrooms, 3 bedrooms even. So it just really depends on your budget. So you start moving into the smaller units when you get into the safety issues, such as assisted living. So assisted living is always typically smaller, and memory care, just in an attempt to decrease your fall risk.
Oh, that's interesting. I didn't realize that. So you can have up to 3 bedrooms, which is nice, according to your budget, obviously. I think one of the other things that are good about independent properties is what you mentioned. There's activities, there's other people. You don't have to be alone.
Correct.
And that's something that we see with our seniors. A lot of times they're by themselves. We've mentioned before in this podcast how many are down here and they really don't have family that are here or family that's checking on them.
Correct.
And one of the things we really see is the loneliness. Correct. We really see so many seniors that are lonely. So the thing I like about the independent properties are that it gives you an opportunity to be with
your peers,
other people.
That's right.
Yeah. We see them playing games and activities, coming down to eat in the dining room and everything together. It's just...
And I think the most important part of that is you get to age in that demographic together. So if something hurts or if you start moving a little slower, more than likely your neighbor is probably moving a little slower too. So you guys can move slower together versus just being, where there's active, and then there's someone who needs like wheelchair assistance. And a lot of times in independent living, you have to maintain your independence in order to actually stay there long term.
Now, that's a good point, and that was going to be something that I wanted to talk about. We see a variety of that.
Yes.
What has been your experience? Because we get called in, and we work with a lot of independent properties because, as Erika said before, that's usually the first step. And we know people, they don't want to go to the next step. And we'll talk about those next steps later. But what has been your experience of seeing kind of the different levels in an independent living?
There's definitely different levels in independent. Some that it's if you're there, let's just take a hypothetical situation. If you moved in 5 years ago, you're probably not as active as you were 5 years ago, right?
Correct.
And so that's where you would come in as far as caregiving assistance to kind of help make things a little bit better for them in the home. But when it gets to the point where, let's say, they need assistance to get in and out of the bed, on and off the commode, realistically, they're just no longer appropriate for that setting, and it will be more safe for them to be in assisted living.
Yeah, and talking about safety, I believe there's some kind of rule, like if they can't help themselves out.
Correct.
If there's a fire.
Yes.
How does that
if
work?
you can't assist with transfer, a lot of communities, and this is for assisted living and independent living, but more so for assisted living because it's licensed.
Gotcha.
So you have to be able to assist with transfer in the event of an evacuation.
Okay, gotcha.
Yeah.
What type of, from your experience, like activities or things like that, do they offer at these independent living communities?
Happy hour.
That's a big one.
That's a big thing. It's not a lot of bingo per se, but it is more so like card games, or they might have theme nights such as Las Vegas night or poker night, or depending on the type of community, they have a man cave, they have a women's tea room.
Yeah. Oh, interesting. I haven't seen one of those.
I actually was visiting a couple weeks ago. I was at an independent living community, and there was the cutest little couple, walking. And I asked the employee there, I said, how long have they been married? They're so cute. And they're like, oh, they just started dating when she moved in. And it's like, I forget about that too.
Yeah.
They're kind of creating, new relationships and new friends and companions. And that
happens a lot.
Yeah.
And I hear, because it seems to me, and I don't know if this is your experience, that the women outweigh
hands down
the number of men on the property.
They're all fighting for the same.
And I hear they're fighting.
And no man is complaining.
I know, it's one of the properties, like I live in Pearland area, one of the properties over there, I would laugh because I have one little senior friend, and every time I go on property, he's with a different set of ladies. Yeah. And he's just gritting.
It's a hard job, but someone has to do it.
Oh, so you mentioned like happy hour.
Yes.
I was saying that's a big thing, and they real alcohol.
like they have bars. They have entire bars. They have theaters. In some instances they have, lights where you can dance and, louder music. So they're really catering to the senior in their current state, and not necessarily the state where you have to sit down at a table and play bingo. The goal is to keep you active. Yeah. And so they try to do things that will keep you engaged.
That's why your services are so good too, because you wouldn't know. When people instantly, you think of senior living, it's instantly like, oh, I don't want to go. Or even, the children making the decisions for the parents.
Correct.
Or helping with the, that decision. They're, unless you've been in there, unless you know about it, you're like, oh, I don't want them to go there,
And it's good to know exactly what it is that you want. Let's say your mom or your dad, what is it that they like?
Right.
And that's you can start narrowing it down from there, because they're still people. I mean, we look at them as, they're seniors, but no, they're people. Like, they traveled, they danced, they live their life, and they're still the same person. So knowing what it is specifically that they like to do, like my mom loves music, she loves dancing, she also loves happy hour. So finding a place that's conducive for her and her personality, that would be the first thing that I would do. Yeah.
Now, what about these active aging communities? I hear that, I see that term. What exactly is that?
So there's a different variety of them. So, for example, are you familiar with CCRCs, right? Where, okay.
Continuing care retirement.
Okay, right, correct. So, with the CCRCs specifically, the goal is to get you in independently so you can age in place, right? But if you're doing active communities, so let's say the one out by me in Katy and Tamaron, they have walking trails, gyms, garden areas. The floor plans are set up to where you don't necessarily have a second floor, but you have the first floor that's ADA accessible with bars. So with the active term is to keep you as active as possible, keep you engaged, keep you moving, but yet still keep you safe. Right? So there's different types. So there are communities where there are actual houses. Then there are apartments, let's say the one in Tanglewood, like Anthology. Yeah, so something like that. But it more so is the lifestyle, and it's also the age. So active might mean 55 instead of 65 and older.
I think that's interesting. My husband's always saying, in so many years we can move to. There's one near our Carolyn. I'm like, no.
Yeah,
but it's true. I mean, yeah, it's a great option, but the fact that I'm almost there is like, oh,
you are not.
I know.
I would say almost.
Not almost. You're so far away. Just continue to stay active.
Oh yeah, but
Active
the whole active thing and independent is so great because statistics show by keeping yourself active, it will keep you going for longer. You're keeping your mind active. So many times we see seniors when they're not active or they get sick or disabled or something like that, they just go down and they go down faster because they're not stimulating anything.
And I think that's one of the perks of active senior living, because you're around other peers that are active. So that encourages you to stay active longer versus if you were in an environment where everyone was watching TV and in wheelchairs, that definitely does something to you mentally and physically.
Yeah. Now, one last thing before we cut for break. In some of these active communities, I know I've had some friends that chose this as an option. There are kinds that are restricted by your income.
So yes, and a lot of times they have waiting lists. So if you want, it's not necessarily a way that you can jump the waiting list, but I would suggest that you would apply early. I would, if there is any money that would be needed as far as a deposit, I would ensure that you have that, because when your time comes and they give you a call, it's you either get it or they give it to someone else and you're no longer on the list. And then I would also look at Baker Ripley, the city of Houston, and resources like that in order to find which apartment or community would be appropriate and try to get on that list.
Yeah, so there's a little bit for everyone, depending on what your income level is. There's those that, okay, if you have a large budget, you can go for these options. If you have a smaller budget, okay, well, there's these options that are available. But like she said, sometimes those can come with a big waiting list. So
it also depends on your acuity level too. So if you are on a smaller budget, but yet you need assistance getting in and out of the bed, on and off the commode, apartment would not suffice.
Yeah,
you would want something a little bit more accommodating, maybe a personal care home.
Okay. So we talked about personal care homes, assisted living, memory care, nursing care. We want to talk a little bit more about that, but we do want to give some time for our sponsors. So we're going to be back after a short commercial break.
Hi, this is T. Foxy Wyckoff, and this is Let's Talk Business and Real Estate, where faith, hope, and determination comes alive. You can't talk business without talking real estate. Oh. Come follow me. The Lord will bless your barns, and you will bless your hands and everything you put them to do. The Lord will bless the property in which He's giving you. Tune in to Let's Talk Business and Real Estate on Wednesdays at 8 p.m. on the Boss Up Houston Network.
Welcome back to Friendly Voices, the Senior Care Podcast, where we're talking today with Erika from A Perfect Fit, talking about what to do to help mom and dad who have to move out of their home. So we've talked about some different independent and active aging options, but now we want to talk about what if mom and dad need a little bit more help. And you mentioned those ADLs, or activities of daily living. So if they need help with those type of things, and if you could talk about what those type of things are, what are the options for them?
So if mom and dad, or mom and or dad, need help with getting in and out of the bed, on and off the commode, help with their medications, help with meal preparation and planning, then at that time you want to consider assisted living. If they have memory care issues, then you want to consider obviously a memory care community. But when it gets to the point ultimately where they're no longer in a safe environment to where they can live alone, that's where you want to start looking at those options and just determine appropriately which one is the best fit.
Okay, so let's talk about a little bit more specifically with assisted living, because I know there's a lot of different options or types of assisted living. Can you explain to us?
Well, it's really one. Just either type A or type B. Okay. But a lot of the communities, they will offer both. And really the biggest difference would be if you can assist with in an event of an evacuation, can you assist, right? But ultimately, a lot of times there are different levels of cares. I've seen the average is about 4 different levels, and the more assistance you need, the higher the cost would be. So if someone starts in and they only need help with, let's say, medication management, let's just call it insulin shots, that might be level 1. But if they need help with insulin, they need help going down to get their meals, they need help with bathing, grooming, toileting, then they will be at the highest level. Or even help getting in and out of the bed, they will be at the highest level.
Okay, so cost-wise, because I know that's going to be something that a lot of our listeners are worried about or wondering about. What's the cost for these type of services?
The average cost is $5,000 per month.
Okay.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah. Wow.
It can go lower. It can also go higher. Just depends on the area, depends on the community. But the average across the state is $5,000 per month.
Okay. Now, I'm hearing a lot of talk about personal care homes. What are these personal care homes? And it seems like everybody is opening a personal care home. And what are your thoughts on that?
Oh, we don't have time for that. But they are useful for, it just depends on the situation. Because a lot of the times the personal care homes, they are not licensed. So now do you sacrifice budget and perhaps safety for someone to care for your mom? Or do you include the license and make sure that the staff is very well trained, but obviously you'll be paying a premium. So if you have, let's say, a budget of $2,800, more than likely you're going to be in a personal care home. And it varies. It may be licensed, and if it is, then you more than likely for that price point will be sharing a room with someone else. A private room can get you, that would be about $3,500 if it was a licensed community. And anything less than that, you would definitely be sharing a room with someone.
So that's a big difference. If you're on a restricted budget and I don't have $5,000, that seems to me that that's a good option for those that, okay, maybe I can come up with $2,800, maybe I can come up with $3,500 to do a personal care option. So you're saying some are licensed, some are not licensed. How does that happen? I mean, Texas doesn't require everyone to be licensed?
They do not. They do not. If you have 4 residents or less, then typically you don't have to get licensed. Well, one of them would be a family member, so 3 or less. You don't have to get a license. But if you have 8 residents, you should definitely have a license. The thing is, Adult Protective Services is not going to shut down a community that's unlicensed, but they're actually doing good work. If there's no abuse incidents, there's no hospitalizations that could have been prevented, they're eating well, their medications are being administered, they're going back and forth to the doctors as needed. APS is not going to get involved because you're doing nothing wrong, you're giving good service. But it does cross the line where you have 8 people in a home, some of them are in the garage. There's only 2 or one working toilet. They're eating processed and canned foods all the time. Incidents of abuse and financial abuse as well, and extortion. I mean, there's so many different things. So you have to choose wisely. Yeah. You have to do your research. You just have to. I mean, and ask them if they're licensed. When you go into the personal care homes, do what I do. I smell. That's the very first thing. If it smells like pine, saw, and pea, run. That's the automatic first thing I look at. I look at the way the staff is dressed. I look at the way the residents are dressed. Is their hair combed? The men. You know how men are, especially older, but still, like, is their hair groomed? Are they shaved? Ironed? Do they have stains everywhere? Look at the bedding. I mean, there's so much to look at. If that's not an environment that you would want your mom to be in, just don't put her in there.
And I think that's why it's so important to talk with an expert like Erika and a professional, because for many families, this is so new to them.
Yes.
And, a lot of times we find out things by word of mouth, and somebody, this person. And, you may put your loved one there and have no idea that they're not even licensed.
Absolutely.
Or if they're not licensed or they are licensed, what's really going on? I think it's so important to use a professional, because this is your loved one.
And I would definitely say interview the owner. If you live in Pearland, don't put your parent in someplace in Cypress.
Yeah.
Put them someplace in Pearland where you can visit. They know that you're going to be there. You're holding them accountable. You can get to know them as a person. If they love your loved one, that's even better, right? But I think when you hold them accountable, you feel much more at ease anyway, right? Versus just dropping them off at a place that can accept them because they only have $600 a month. I highly don't recommend that.
Yeah, so there are options like that, group homes. But like she said, I mean, the risk of abuse can be very high. You have to do your due diligence and be careful. We've heard some really bad stories here locally about residents being, tons of them in a house, and just all kind of craziness happening. People not getting their medications, getting the wrong medications.
Sleeping on the floor.
It's just heartbreaking.
It is.
Heartbreaking. And for many of our listeners, they may be in other states and might have, their parents live somewhere else. So you're trying to make these decisions and you're not even there to physically see them. So that's why I think it's so important to use professionals, those that are experts. And the thing I like about using experts like yourself is that you have that experience. You work with others, you get the feedback, you work with these families, you place them, and then you listen and you see. Yes. And you're not going to keep them on your referral list if they're not doing that.
Not even a little bit. They're totally fired. But I would also say, too, for any family members that might be out of town and they do have a loved one here, if you can't find them on the internet, that's not someone that you want. You should be able to find them on the internet. You should be able to find pictures. They should also be able to send you an actual contract. If they don't give you the professional feel, that's automatic no.
Yeah, so I think a lot of times it's just using your instinct.
Yes.
Using your instinct when it comes to these. Let's talk a little bit more about like the AL and the memory care options. So when would I use the AL versus the memory care?
So you would specifically use memory care if they are at risk of elopement. If under no circumstances can they hold a conversation consistently and retain that information. And that's very important because now we're the medications, the food, all of that gets affected, right? So assisted living is specifically for those who just need assistance with their ADLs, with